There was a lot of talk that it was Netanyahu that dragged Trump and America into the war. Can anybody drag Trump into anything?
My thing about that is it's classic protocols of elders of Zion crap, this thing. It's such a trope because, Trump is such a poor white Christian boy misled by the evil hook-nosed Jew. Give me a break. Give me a break. Nobody can make Trump do anything he doesn't want to do.
My guest today, for the third time, is Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, one of India's leading geopolitical analysts and defense economists. Over the years, he's written extensively on national security, nuclear strategy, and great power competition, and he's become known for challenging conventional wisdom, even when his views are controversial. Since our last interview, the Middle East has changed dramatically. Israel and Iran have fought directly, negotiations have resumed, alliances are shifting, and even Washington appears to be debating its own foreign policy. Today, we're putting many of Abhijit's biggest ideas back under the microscope, not just to understand what happened, but to ask where all of this is heading. Abhijit, welcome.
Thanks for having me back, Daniel. Always a pleasure.
You told me something privately that I haven't heard anyone say. You believe that Epic Fury was a remarkable military victory, but it may ultimately become a political debacle. Maybe you can unpack that for us.
So, look, if we go back to the Clausewitzian view of war, military is just one aspect in a mix of things you call, victory as such. Victory is a political concept. Militarily, did Iran get hit, have the living daylights clobbered out of it? Yes, it did. But has Iran won on the negotiating table what it lost militarily? Yes. Before this war, Hormuz followed international law. You couldn't charge, tolls for it and things like that. And America's literally handed over the sovereignty, not of itself, but of Oman and the UAE to Iran on a golden platter. And even though it's an MOU, now an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, doesn't have the force of law. It can't be enforced, at least in India, that an MOU can't be enforced contractually in any kind of way. Effectively, now the negotiating position is you have agreed to Iranian sovereignty and tolls. It is now for America and its allies to negotiate its way out of that. That becomes the problem with an MOU. That becomes the problem with the negotiating position. If you remember, when the Camp David Accord was rejected by Yasser Arafat, the Israeli complaint always was that we would give him everything he wanted. In the Camp David case, it was 97% of all the land of the West Bank and Gaza, and land in lieu of what they had lost in Jerusalem, right? And a capital in a small part of Jerusalem. He rejected that, walked away, and the next time they met, he assumed that this had already been given to him. And the negotiation now was from that point onwards. This is the same thing you're looking at now, right? The problem here is it has already been given. That sovereignty has been accepted. Yasser Arafat walked away before it was given to him, but this has been given to Mojtaba, if he's alive, to the Iranians. It is now for America to pull a Yasser Arafat and walk away. Huge problem. Second, Trump has gone and done exactly what Obama did with the JCPOA. Now, see, there were many problems with the JCPOA, but it was also a good deal. It was good in that it accepted that, trust is a political commodity. There will be 10 years of harsh sanctions and, monitoring and things like that. After which there was a sunset clause. Iran would have, erased its shame through a penitence. I'm sorry to use monastical language, but that's kind of what works out here. Through penitence, it would wash away the shame of nuclear cheating till 2003. And it would then get a 5-year down period on that where, the checks and things would be slowly brought into sync with other countries that haven't cheated. And finally, there would be breakout. Breakout in the sense, breakout of sanctions and things like that, full sanctions and things like that. The downside at that point was it also lifted sanctions that had nothing to do with Iran's nuclear program. It had to do with Iranian sponsorship of terrorism and things like that. The problem is Trump has gone and accepted all of that. So everything that has been given to Iran is back to JCPOA minus all the fine technical detail of the JCPOA, because there have been no technical folks who have gone there to negotiate this deal, plus sovereignty over the Hormuz, plus the acceptance that an attack by Israel can lead to attacks on US allies in the region that have nothing to do with this, and on infrastructure like oil and gas infrastructure that has nothing to do, that is not a military target and not part of a war. For me, that's a spectacular defeat that America has scored. But this shouldn't come as a surprise to Israel, because Trump pulled the same thing off with India in 2025. When we went after Pakistan for terrorism, he pulled the rug from under us and then decided to normalize Pakistan and other terrorists. So, I've always been taught, never judge a person by how they behave with you, judge a person by how they behave with other people. And I think Netanyahu put all his eggs into the Trump basket, pushed home his advantage. He has a very considerable advantage, no doubt. But you never escalate without a de-escalation strategy. I don't think Netanyahu factored in a de-escalation strategy.
Now, you also told me that you believe that the Iranian regime actually emerged politically stronger, right? They tried their best to get rid of the regime, and now it's coming out stronger. Is that your assessment?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. It's not just my family that live in Tehran who are all, pork eating, bikini wearing, weed smoking liberals. Imagine those kind of people saying, Islamic Republic 2.0 might not be so bad. These were people who were saying, F the Islamic Republic till 3 months back. Suddenly, Islamic Republic 2.0 is okay. Are you serious? Look, Iran's a very nationalist country. They tend to rally around the flag, which is natural. I think for any modern state, that's natural. What's scary here is that America has in fact achieved regime change, except it removed all the so-called now look, I mean, we've had this conversation before. There's no real moderate in Iran, right? These are all relatives. It's like what Einstein used to say, you sit near a hot chick for 5 seconds and it feels like for 5 hours and it feels like 5 seconds, and you sit next to an ugly chick for 5 seconds and it feels like 5 hours, kind of thing. So that kind of relative. But it's strengthened the hardliners out here. They have actually delivered a political victory, which means the message to the Iranian nation that has gone out is there is nothing to be gained from compromise. Stick together, take a hard line, and that is the only path that yields results. How do you think, and anybody who has ever had a dog and knows how to train a dog, about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. What do you think the reinforcing message has gone out to the Iranian public and the Iranian government? It's not just a victory for Iran, it's a victory for the IRGC, it's a victory for all the absolute Qasem Soleimani types within that government. And what's even worse is that they perceive their victory to be even greater because the Democrats had burnt a lot of bridges with Israel. If you remember, in the final years of the Obama period, they were actively denying Israel intelligence. They'd literally hacked Israeli drone cameras and seeing to it that Israel didn't carry out any covert strikes in Iran and things like that. What has since happened is the Iranians believe they have also driven a wedge between the Republicans and Israel, which seems to be the case. At least among large sections of the Republican Party, a large part of the MAGA crowd, who I think we can safely say a lot of them were closet anti-Semites. But it's a good thing when you're in the closet. At least there is a public mood to keep you in the closet. When those breaks come off and it becomes public, that's a very, very dangerous slope to go down. There is, of course, the theory we'd better have sunshine and everything can come out. In this particular case, the way it's led to historically, I'm not a big subscriber of that theory. It's better it stays in the closet. But anyway, it's come out and other people have joined in this bandwagon. As if America has no agency. America is controlled by, the protocols of the elders of Zion sitting somewhere in Jerusalem controlling American foreign policy. it's opened up a lot of these old blood libel tropes, a lot of these old protocol tropes and things like that. I never thought I'd see American public opinion go like this. And I think they're trying to find a scapegoat, and that scapegoat they've decided is Israel. And look, I don't know if Netanyahu is going to be the sacrificial lamb or not, but I think the problem's gone a bit deeper than that.
Now, one of the biggest stories in Washington right now is what appears to be two competing schools of thought inside the Trump administration. On the one side, you have J.D. Vance, who's emphasizing restraint, avoiding long-term wars. On the other side, you have Marco Rubio, who's more of a hawkish approach to Iran and has stronger public support for Israel. What do you think of this divide, real divide? And is it something we should be worried about for the next administration?
I think it's an artificial divide, and I don't think it's a policy divide per se. I think it's a personal, political, tactical divide between somebody who thinks he can become the next president and another person who thinks his shot at the presidency is about 3-4 terms away. That's all. This is Marco shoring up the MAGA crowd that feels let down by no foreign wars for 3-4 terms down the line, when people's memories would have, faded. And Vance, who feels that he's the natural selection because he's got to go up next, given term limits. I don't think this is a real political divide per se at all. That said, I would also say that it's extremely precarious in terms of how this game is going to get played out. I think the margin for error for Israel right now in Washington has reduced very, very dramatically, and it has to be very, very carefully played. Had America not gotten involved to the scale it did in Epic Fury, had it been like 2025, a mowing the grass operation rather than an escalation operation, that would have been much more in Israel's favor than this particular episode, because then the political levers available to Israel in DC would have been a whole lot more. I think the second lesson we've also learned from this is military intelligence is not the same as political intelligence. You can have extremely granular, exquisite military intelligence, but the political calculus could be totally wrong, which is what I think has happened in Iran. I think we spoke about this, Daniel, either in our first or our second episode, where, every time I'd go to Israel and sit down with the foreign ministry there or with the INSS folks at Tel Aviv University, I'd keep telling them, bro, you speak Farsi, I don't speak Farsi, but, I've had more natural interactions, not intelligence interactions. If you think Iran's going to come down, tumbling like a pack of cards, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And it's also a case of wishful thinking driving intelligence inputs rather than, look, with all political intelligence, there is a call to be made that's very personal. No amount of data points is going to be accurate in that particular case. But I think it was necessary for somebody to actively red team this. I think the red teaming failed.
Yeah. Now, you also made an interesting distinction. You said that Democrats are drifting away from Israel because of the domestic political realities, while some Republicans are becoming more skeptical for completely different reasons. Can you unpack that? It seems like Israel doesn't have friends on either side now. I mean, what are your thoughts?
There are friends of Israel both in the Democrats and Republicans. What I'm talking about is the larger movement of the party. Now, for me, supporting Israel has always been an IQ proposition. If you have more than 120 IQ, I think I think over, say, about 140 IQ, you tend to support Israel quite a bit. Between 100 and 140, you tend to generally support Israel, and generally under 30, you tend to support the Palestinians. I think there's been a general dumbing down of the American discourse so significantly, because of things like wokeness, intersectionality, and all that gobbledygook. We've seen a huge dumbing down of the discourse. You've seen emotional points overtake hard realpolitik points. And the more and more the Democrats, they keep calling Trump a populist, but I think the Democrats became more demonstrative populists than the Republicans ever did. And that dumbing down, that intersectionality leads to every woke transgender, wannabe transgender, transitioning transgender, whatever, combined with tax the rich, tax everyone, Thomas Piketty followers. So there's this huge intersection of low IQ, failing education system, Thomas Piketty supporters, Thomas Piketty School of Economics, uh, uh, intersectional types, and the Palestinian types that have gotten together, and it's become too powerful an alliance to fuse. But it's fused into something too dangerous now to play divide and rule. I think there's a very serious need to now break apart intersectionality. I don't think any of us saw the dangers of it as clearly as is coming home to roost, because the problem then becomes, say Muslims had a certain vote bank in America. They all uh, come out and vote. They're quite vocal about their political preferences, and they bring ground power. You'll never see a Jew go riot out in the streets. You'll never see a Jew go, setting the very high income. The most civil disobedience you'd see either from a Hindu or a Jew is to probably go outside somebody's house and scream, "You suck." And that's the peak of civil disobedience for a Jew or a Hindu. Not so for Muslims. Low income, live in violent neighborhoods, high crime rate. When they go out, they actually do go out. And that kind of street veto, street power has a political constituency all of its own. Combined with all of this, where everybody believes that Palestine is their problem, it doesn't matter that, Palestine will throw homosexuals off roofs or things like that. I mean, imagine we discussed this, right? It's like chickens for KFC is what quiz for Palestine's like. But for whatever, that coalition has been formed. It largely tends to be Democrat, and it largely tends to act as a herd together. And this is the classic herd mentality playing out within the Democrats. With MAGA, I think the issue's been kind of the horseshoe theory that the right also has always had its fringes. And I don't think we should be in any delusion that any right-wing movement in any white country is going to have a fringe, Nazi fringe. Nazi or a Nazi-inspired fringe. Not everybody's a Nazi, but those Nazi things. I mean, fine. Protocols of Elders of Zion is actually a Russian thing, not a German thing at all. But it's uh, it's there. It's present in every single right-wing movement you see. Alternative for Deutschland, for example, mostly they seem like very decent chaps to me, the ones I've met. But one or two, I've always been like, I'm not too sure about that. You give me very look, it's a crime in Germany. I've got to go back to Germany for opera season, so I'll be careful in what I say. But you can't call people Nazis out there and get away with it. But you get the drift. You get the drift. One or two of them give off those vibes, right? It's going to be there. It doesn't mean the whole movement's like that, but it's there. I think what the strength of this intersectional pro-Palestine left has done is that it has enabled a lot of the right hate to come out. And because there's a marketplace of ideas, there are others who have gotten attached to it. And that clearly has formed a constituency all of its own. It's that yin-yang theory, one enables the other. And that's essentially what you're seeing out here. And that's where I see the Republicans and the Democrats going. Is it salvageable? Yes, I think there are sane people on both sides that can bring it back. I don't know what the political cost of that is going to be, either to Israel or to Jews in America, but I think there is a lot of pain to be endured in that process. I think, for one, Israel will have to divorce. Well, had you asked me the same question last year, I would have said Israel absolutely should not divorce its demand that nuclear and terrorism and ballistic missiles be delinked. They should all be kept linked. Right now, because the ground has already been seeded on ballistic missiles and terrorism, they're not part of whatever Trump has agreed to. It might be tactically wise to sacrifice the other two and just focus on nuclear for the time being. Maybe that's the price. I don't know. You're an American. I'm not an American. I'm just giving you a sort of outsider perspective out here. But this is one of those times where, you walk carefully, observe carefully, be ready to be tactically flexible.
It seems more and more likely that Israel is going to try to become more self-reliant, especially in the next administration. We don't know what's going to be, but as they move away from reliance on America, it's possible that they're going to be more reliant on India. Do you agree with that assessment? What do you think that India could provide America? India could provide Israel that America couldn't.
India is a very poor substitute for Israel. I wouldn't pin my hopes on India. Uh, Fine, we have a very strict anti-terrorism policy as long as this government continues. But if the opposition comes to power again, sticky wicket, sticky wicket. It's just like the Democrats and what very similar dynamics to the Democrats on the opposition side here. Is that really somebody you want to rely on? A country that doesn't really have a manufacturing base, a country that doesn't have a veto at the UN Security Council, a country that doesn't really count for much or weigh much on the international stage in terms of proactive diplomacy or in terms of, bringing hard assets to the table, hard power projection assets to the table. Another option was China, but we've seen how far China has gone in terms of supporting the Palestinians. I don't know if you know this, Daniel, but there's this really scary photo on my timeline somewhere on Twitter. I'd retweeted somebody else. Xi Jinping literally gave a speech in front of a map of the Middle East. There was no Israel on it. There was no West Bank or Gaza on it. All of it was one, Israel plus West Bank plus Gaza, all marked as Palestine. Xi Jinping's a smart man. He knows exactly what he was doing. And that's scary. The Russians haven't done that. They've actually got Israel marked on their maps. The Chinese have literally removed Israel from a map in which their president gave a speech from, or in front of, rather. I don't think there's any real substitute for America right now. And I think that relationship has to be fixed. Sure, could Israel have relied on, say, France plus Germany plus Britain being together? None of those three countries can see eye to eye, and I certainly wouldn't be relying on France. As an Indian, I would. As an Israeli, I wouldn't, given all the topsy-turvy things that Macron has done so far. Britain under Labour? Definitely not. I think we've seen how their policies have been going. Germany, sure, but Germany tends to underplay itself in Europe. It's not going to push anything in Europe.
Now, you also mentioned that India stood firmly with Israel during Operation Rising Lion, but in Epic Fury, it seems like they've shifted that. What changed? And if you can explain what India's view is of all of this.
India's first priority, see, in Rising Lion, Indian populations in the Gulf didn't get affected. In Epic Fury, it did. And that was purely because of American involvement. The only thing that changed in that entire equation was America getting involved in it. Because sure, the positives for Israel grew. Lot more firepower, lot more intel, lot more reach. Excuse me. But it also meant a lot more vulnerability. Especially for the Indian population sitting, that's about 10 million strong population that we have in the Gulf. That's not an insignificant amount. That's quite a huge amount of people out there. I think it's more than the population of Israel, I think, including the Arab Israelis. That's never going to go down well in India when their livelihood gets affected. Plus, of course, there was the fact that we wanted to screw Trump over in a sense after he screwed us over last year in May 2025, where he essentially re-platformed the Pakistanis after they carried out a terror attack in India, particularly nasty terror attack, and went glorifying a man who literally ordered that terror attack. For us, that's the equivalent of Ayatollah Khamenei being called into the White House, being kissed on the cheek and being told what a great guy he is. Rough equivalent. To hit Indian interests, hugely hit Indian interests. That's a very, very big Indian interest. It affected India's foreign policy in that it was time to kind of screw over the Americans, kind of, not exactly, but, pay back in coin, a certain level of schadenfreude. You know what? The very curious thing was Israel never even featured in the Indian commentary on Epic Fury. It was all about America, America, America. The very good thing for Israel in terms of Epic Fury was all the negatives in the Indian public sphere never accrued to Israel. They all accrued to America. Israel was kept completely out of the commentary. This isn't an Israeli campaign, this is an American, as opposed to America, which wanted to scapegoat Israel. In India, the public commentary was, oh, Israel's not involved in this. This is all Trump. Let's screw Trump. But third, the proximity to Israel also saw to it there was a great deal of moderation in Indian foreign policy. We want to screw over Trump. We did not want to screw over Israel, which is why when Iran started attacking all the Gulf countries, the prime minister called up every one of those leaders and those attacks were strongly condemned. The problem then again was that Iran had attacked Indians. About 10 Indians, I think, total were killed in the cumulative Iranian attacks on various Gulf states. But then America also decided to hit Indian tankers and 3 Indians were killed. So, cumulatively, it was such a huge negative for India. And again, the negative for India was entirely America's doing it. Had this just been an Israeli campaign, the negatives to India would have not been there. And this is what I mean. I don't think Netanyahu saw de-escalation, redundancy, ring fencing properly. I think carried away by too much hubris from Rising Lion.
Now, there was a lot of talk, at least in the beginning of this war, that it was Netanyahu that dragged Trump and America into the war. What do you have to say about that? Can anybody drag Trump into anything?
Look, this is, my thing about that is it's classic Protocols of Elders of Zion crap, this thing. It's such a trope, because, Trump is such a poor white Christian boy misled by the evil hook-nosed Jew. Give me a break. Give me a break. Nobody can do, nobody can, make Trump do anything he doesn't want to do. You can allure Trump to some extent, but that's about it. It would also mean if you accept the argument that it was Israel that kind of manipulated poor, innocent baby Trump into doing all of this, then you also have to accept that it was Netanyahu that, manipulated Trump into giving over sovereignty of the Hormuz, divorcing ballistic missiles and terrorism from an overall deal. So did Netanyahu and Israel do that? Obviously not. So Trump is his own guy. He's very erratic. What he sees as the art of the deal or whatever, I mean, that definition keeps changing. The deal, a great deal isn't a great deal objectively speaking. It's whatever Trump decides is a great deal at any given point of time. And to be fair to him, he has pulled off certain things which would have not been possible had he listened to typical Washington think tank punditry. So, for example, nobody could have pulled off the Abraham Accords. Nobody could have done that. I think when you sit and talk to Jared Kushner, and the late Ambassador Martin Indyk said, they came to us and they went listening to us. And Jared Kushner says, well, we did listen to them. We heard them out. It's just that we didn't take their advice. And not taking somebody's advice doesn't mean that we haven't listened. We just chose a different path. They chose a different path. I think it was a brave path. And I think the Abraham Accord was an absolute net positive for everybody, for the whole region. I think it's a fantastic thing. It should have continued. Great. He also succeeded in Venezuela. Who thought that a decapitation like what happened to Maduro in Venezuela would produce the kind of changes for the better that Venezuela is facing today? Nobody thought that. Trump did. He tried something out of the box. It worked. I think this was one of those out of the box things too many where it just went wrong.
Now, also, what do you think about Trump publicly going after Netanyahu and Israel, that they don't stop shooting back at Hezbollah? Why don't they just stop shooting? All that stuff in the media. What do you think about that? Is that concerning to you at all?
This is why I say it's a political victory for Iran. Everybody's talking about Israel shooting back at Hezbollah, but nobody's talking in the American press about Hezbollah doing the shooting to begin with. Notice, you can't shoot back. What do you mean I can't shoot back? It's okay to say I can't shoot, but you can't say I can't shoot back. Where is the equivalent pressure on Hezbollah to stop the rockets and stop the attacks? Will a Hezbollah attack on Israel then also be counted as a breach of the ceasefire? It has to. Technically, if you look at that 14-point memorandum of understanding, it says ceasefire. When it says ceasefire extends to Lebanon and Yemen, it also means that Hezbollah is bound by it. The Houthis are bound by it. Why isn't that? And I think Israel's doing very bad PR by not highlighting the fact that Hezbollah are the ones doing all the attacking in this particular case, and Israel's behaving reactively. It doesn't help that Netanyahu, to seem aggro, sometimes even the aggro need to play victim. Netanyahu is not good at playing victim. And then that horrible tweet from Ben Gvir really didn't help things. That was in the middle of all of this. This was like, it was the Sabbath cholent gone wrong, spiced up by too much chili or whatever, and somebody suddenly decides to throw bacon into it, of all things. That's what Ben Gvir did. He threw pork bacon into a perfectly made Shabbat cholent. Why?
Yeah.
Why would you do this? I mean, really, he could have said it quietly. Did he really have to put that stupid tweet on Twitter?
For those that didn't see it, what did he say?
So for those who didn't see it, he said, because an Israeli soldier had been killed, I think 2, 3 Israeli soldiers had been killed, he said that for every Israeli mother who feels pain, 1,000 Lebanese mothers will feel the pain. We will not stop till we... You can't say that. You just can't say that. It's illegal. Any definition of proportionality, I will kill 1,000 for every 3 killed, doesn't work. This is the problem. Maybe only 20 people getting killed can have a disproportionate influence on Hezbollah targeting. It was the formulation that was crude. He could have said things like, we will hit them hard. We will, Hezbollah will feel the pain of castration, even if you want to use that word, but not 1,000 for one reason. You can't say that. It was just illegal at so many levels, on so many levels of, and I'm not talking about religious law, right? Religious law, it's justified. We're talking about modern international law, which is what a minister is expected to tweet. And see, it just gave fuel to every single conspiracy theorist who's been claiming, we know Israel doesn't do mass targeting. We know Israel's been very careful in targeting Gaza. We know it's been proportionate because every single building we've hit, remarkably, seems to have a secondary explosion, which usually indicates there's ammunition out there. But then, remember, you also have to deal with public opinion that does not believe that. And a tweet like this, it's that one trigger, a person in authority sitting in the cabinet of Israel, literally making every conspiracy theorist's dream come true. To quote Talleyrand, it was worse than a crime, it was a blunder.
Now, what do you have to say about the negotiations between Israel and the government of Lebanon? Do you think that can have any sway on Hezbollah's actions, or is this just a purely symbolic thing?
I think there was that sweet spot in between where President Michel Aoun had actually decided with the Lebanese army that he was going to disarm Hezbollah. I think that was the point for Israel to have gotten involved, taken it very seriously. By the way, this is with the benefit of hindsight. Hezbollah is a very strong, duplicitous, insidious organization. It still might not have worked out. But I would much rather have Lebanese fighting Lebanese than have an Israeli fighting fighting the Lebanese. That's just more bad PR, not required at the moment. This was one of those fantastic places where the Lebanese army could have been pitted against Hezbollah, had been played properly. And this is, I think, something the Western world, not just Israel, the Western world, the Westosphere, makes this mistake too often, where there is granularity, where there's political granularity that can be exploited for divide and rule, ends up consolidating. An invasion of South Lebanon, look, I'm not disagreeing with the military logic of it. The political logic of it, question mark. And we have history to go by. The last occupation of southern Lebanon, was it militarily productive? Yes. It gave a buffer zone to northern Israel. Yes, undeniably. Did it do good for Lebanese Christians? Yes, it did. Politically, it was a disaster. Why repeat a disaster? This isn't making a new mistake. New mistakes, totally understandable. It's repeating an old mistake where if you actually talk to the Lebanese today, they will all pretend, Lebanese Christians today, they pretend, oh, we never cooperated with Israel. Really? Literally, Israel came and saved your ass in the 80s. You were getting slaughtered by the PLO and the Muslim militias. But collective, amnesia, and they're like, oh, we all stood against Israeli. Never agglomerate your enemies, always divide. Like I said, to quote Talleyrand again, worse than a crime blunder. Militarily, sure. But again, I want to divorce the fact that this whole podcast that we're doing today is based on the fact that emphatic military victories can actually be politically disastrous.
I spoke to some military experts the other week, and he argued that to Iran, Hezbollah is more important than their own nuclear ambitions. Meaning they would be more ready to give up their nuclear ambitions than to give up Hezbollah. What do you think about that?
No, see, I think they're linked. I think the Indian example with Pakistan kind of proves that. So what happens with India and Pakistan is Pakistan tries 3 times, exactly like the Arab countries tried 3 times to destroy Israel. Pakistan tried 3 times, failed miserably, and then they decided we're not equal. India is up here, Pakistan is down here. We can not pull this up. So what do? We resort to terrorism. The problem with terrorism is every time you do terror, you will get back a conventional response. And this is where, the headboard behind me is quite useful. So in order to protect these actions, sub-conventional actions, you need a nuclear umbrella out here. Hezbollah's actions essentially are linked to the nuclear program. They are not separate from the nuclear program. The nuclear program exists to give Hezbollah cover, and Hezbollah's actions exist to validate the nuclear program. They are inseparable. They are conjoined twins. Iran will not prioritize one over the other. They are inseparable in the Iranian point of view. Even in my point of view, they are inseparable. A nuclear arsenal by itself means nothing. I mean, tomorrow, if Israel bombs Tehran, what's Iran going to do? Drop a nuke on Tel Aviv? Of course not. They're instead going to send a whole horde of suicide bombers to take out, God knows, buses, trains, what have you in Israel. These are conjoined. They are not separate. It does not help Israel's strategic thinking to actually prioritize and separate these things because they are not prioritized or separated in the Iranian mind. And I say this extrapolating the way Pakistanis see things, because it was very similar a situation vis-a-vis India for Pakistan, and that is why they chose terrorism as a tool, and they chose nuclear weapons in order to protect and expand the scope for terror actions. Deterrence was broken the moment Israel targeted that Iranian embassy or consulate in Syria. Was it Syria or Lebanon? I forget. Which is then what brought about direct attacks. That has been broken. And in order to reestablish that now, Iran needs nuclear because Hezbollah wasn't doing its job. Once it gets nuclear, that old status quo gets reestablished again, where Hezbollah attacks or attacks in Syria can only be responded to by attacking Hezbollah or Syria and not the Iranian main.
Now, what do you think about the U.S. choosing Pakistan to be the negotiator? And India, how does India view that? U.S. butting up to Pakistan and all that?
Look, there was a strategic opportunity. Pakistan was extremely agile. It used that opportunity. Congratulations to Pakistan. In India, you'll see a lot of, childish, nasty nitpicking. Oh, what kind of negotiation is this? Look, you have to admire even an enemy who pulls off a bunny from a hat. I was going to say hat trick. Do you guys know what a hat trick is? It's a very cricket term.
I think so.
Anyway, yeah, the rabbit from the hat. Um, They pulled it off. Good for them. It hasn't been terribly successful. It hasn't held, but they've earned a lot of brownie points. Took a lot of political risk doing it. They certainly understand the nuances of English and they understand the nuances of Farsi. A very good, I think, a good choice of mediator, even if it doesn't suit India or Israel at all. And we detest the parties involved in it, but good for them. They've produced some kind of a document, but we also need to remember it's not the mediator who makes American mediation's different. When they feel they want a certain solution, they tend to brute force and they have the economic muscle to back it up. They'll say, if you do this, we'll ensure this much investment, so on and so forth. Pakistan is not in that position. It's more a enabler than American style mediator. American mediation is sort of enforced mediation where they can actually produce outcomes. Pakistan is not in a state to produce outcomes. What it really does is convey messages and takes maybe the sharp edge and sting out of certain messages when they get a bit ill-tempered, which is still a very significant diplomatic skill. It is still risk-taking behavior. So congratulations to them.
Today, we're seeing people that are being investigated or arrested over online speech in countries like UK and elsewhere in Europe. I just learned that in 2018, you were arrested for some social media posts. This is the third time we're speaking this. I didn't know that. But looking back all these years later, what did that experience teach you about free speech and the power of the state? And what are your thoughts on that experience and what we're going through now?
Look, the one thing I learned was you're not in jail because the state doesn't want you in jail. When any state wants you in jail for whatever reason, you'll be in jail. I think Lavrenti Beria said this to Stalin. Show me the man and I'll show you the law. It's the classic case throughout. Now, we thought Western civilization understood that. It had ring-fenced itself from it by the notion that speech could not be punished, that the punishment for speech was speech. The punishment for speech was not physical action. But that is now falling apart. It's again the left that managed to do this. Hate speech. Cancel culture. Cancel culture introduced consequences for speech, which should have never existed. And this is what they do. They start innocuously, slowly, till it gains traction. The problem now is we all accept somehow or some way where the right also does cancel culture. It's been normalized. That is the end of free speech, because the moment there are consequences to speech, you cannot have real free speech. And real free speech is not speech you like. Free speech, the right to free speech, is fundamentally the right to speech that offends you. If you're going to start jailing people for that, big problem, because that is the basis on which Western democracy is based. You take that away, creativity goes away. You backdoor a police state, and ultimately, what is hate speech? What are the justiciable standards of hate speech? See, the Brandenburg Law in America determines what is incitement. There has to be a specific threat against a specific target for it to cross that threshold of incitement. What is hate speech? There is no justiciable standard of hate speech that I have ever read that in any form or way makes it a tangible. I feel. God forbid laws start punishing people based on what somebody feels, because those feelings will change. And therefore the threshold of law will change. And therefore the threshold of punishment will change. But you know what they say, every democracy lays the seeds of its own demise. I think that's what we're seeing. I think there's a need for a full-on reset out here. And mind you, when all of this shit was happening after the 7th of October, the kind of crap we were seeing calling for the killing of Jews, that never passed the bar of hate speech. There were no consequences for it. They actually passed the bar of the Brandenburg Law, but there were no consequences for it. So you see a weakening of tangible law and a strengthening of non-tangible feeling-based punishment. Very, very scary.
Did that experience make you more careful about what you say or more
Not really.
determined to defend free speech?
Not really. I've always been defending free speech. But that experience did teach me that line up your bullets carefully. Don't say things till you've got everything in order. Uh, Keep wriggle room. That's what it taught me. And pick your battles carefully.
Do you think that democracies are becoming less tolerant of offensive speech over time?
Because the left controls humanities, 99% of humanities literature is written by the left. There is an systemic bias towards the left, and I think the left knows what it has done. It's doing it to serve its own political purposes, and the net result is democracies unexaminingly, because the right doesn't seem to learn its own first principles very clearly. It is sliding in that direction, yes. Emphatically, yes.
Yeah. I mean, at least in the UK, it seems like there's a big double standard. If you speak against Islam or the migrants and things like that, they'll arrest you. But if it's the other way around, then it seems to be they'll let you go. I mean, what do you think is more dangerous today, the hate speech or the governments that decide what qualifies as hate speech?
The very fact that we now have to think about penalizing speech in itself, the very fact that we're having this conversation, Daniel, is scary. Speech can never be penalized. There is only one standard of free speech, and that is incitement. Does it incite somebody to translate something into physical action? Yes. That needs to be penalized. Other than that, it doesn't matter how much I hate you. Now, you know I'm gay. You can call me a poofter, you can call me a faggot. That isn't free speech. That is free speech. I may not like it. I might want to punch you for it. But if I punch you for it, I go to jail. Why? Because I translated my irritation into action. You just can't punish people for being nasty. Being nasty is free speech. Being offensive is free speech. Being a racist, if you want, is free speech. Being a homophobe is free speech. Being an anti-Semite is free speech. The moment you don't accept that and you start categorizing and hair splitting, that's the beginning of the end. But anyway, nobody listens to me, so c'est la vie.
But I know you've built a reputation for making predictions before they became obvious. What's one prediction you're making today?
Prognostication, please. I'm not an astrologer. I do believe in astrology, but this ring, the 7-carat yellow sapphire, is based on what my astrologer told me. Even though I'm an atheist, I am not religious. I'm superstitious. But anyway, but yeah, prognostications, please, not predictions.
Okay. What prognostication would you make today that most people would disagree with now, but 5 years, 10 years from now, they'll say, yeah, Abhijit saw it coming?
I think we're heading to a fairly dystopian future because based on this free speech thing and the way politics is moving, the way policing standards have gone down, where the policing think 10 times, where the police think 10 times before they do things because they're more scared. They don't look at it as a vocation where they want to do the right thing. They're more concerned about disciplinary committees and are they seen to be doing the right thing, and PR, and how this will play out on TV. All of this combined is going to lead to a point where we look back to the early 2000s and late 1990s as the golden days. We're all going to become Wahhabis in that sense, who want to go back to the 4 Rashidun caliphs. We're all going to be looking at, the good old 1990s and 2000s. We're all going to become Abdul ibn Wahhabs.
Okay. Abhijit, I thank you for your time as always. Really appreciated the conversation and hope to speak to you again soon.
You really are a sadist, Daniel, because this was such a gloomy, uh, absolutely like a dementor sucked all the happiness out of it. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I hope
If you want to end on a happy note, please. What's the good news?
I don't know what the good news is, man. Even I'm searching for it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you again. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Always a
Absolutely.
pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. Take care.